Yeah, all good. Can you able to see my slides?
So I already launched it. Yeah.
No, is it? Can you
Yeah.
able to see my slides?
Yes. It
Okay.
is visible.
But the previous session is still going on, right?
Yeah, it's towards the end, sir.
Okay.
Warm greetings to everyone. I, Srishti Singh, welcome you to the second prestigious keynote session of the day. Our keynote speaker is listed as one of the world's most highly cited researcher by Clarivate Analytics report for the last 5 consecutive years, with over 30,000 citations and as one of the world's most influential mind. He is none other than the very distinguished professor and director, Center for Advanced Modeling and Geospatial Information Systems, Dr. Biswajit Pradhan. Dr. Pradhan is an internationally established scientist in the field of geospatial information systems, remote sensing, image processing, geocomputing, machine learning, and environmental modeling, to name a few. He is also a distinguished professor at the University of Technology, Sydney, and an ambassador scientist for Alexander Humboldt Foundation, Germany. In 2018 and in 2018 to 2020, he was awarded as world-class professor by the Ministry of Research, Technical and Higher Education, Indonesia. Dr. Pradhan has more than 17 years of research, teaching and industrial experience, and has published over 500 research articles in referred technical international ISI journals, 13 book chapters, and 8 books, and more than 150 conference proceedings. Dr. Pradhan is the editor of Arabian Journal of Geosciences, Geomatics, Natural Hazards and Risks, Landslides, Central European Journal of Geosciences. He specializes in the field of geospatial information systems, remote sensing and image processing, complex modeling, geocomputing, machine learning, and soft computing applications, natural hazards and environmental modeling, and remote sensing of Earth observations. He has also been a recipient of about 55 awards in recognition of his excellence in teaching, service, and research. He sits as a board member of many national programs in Southeast Asia. He is a regular reviewer for many international bodies like European Science Foundation, Dutch Research Council, Austrian Science Foundation, Research Council UK, Swiss National Science Foundation, Belgian Remote Sensing Program, and many more. He is the associate editor and editorial member in more than 8 ISI journals. He has delivered up till now 35 keynote and invited talks at international conferences. He has edited and reviewed more than 2,300 articles. Now, may I request Dr. Biswajit Pradhan to share his intellectual views with us. Up to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Very good morning. I hope that you all can hear me well. All right, so thank you very much once again to the USG 2021 team for inviting me. It has been a pleasure actually having this association with Professor Kamal Jain, who has been wonderful in inviting me 2 years ago at the conference that we had. Unfortunately, the COVID came and we couldn't meet face to face this time, but nevertheless, it's a wonderful way actually delivering a talk as well. So today I'll be giving a talk about geospatial intelligence and computation for urban applications. So the name itself, so I'll be explaining a little bit more about what is geospatial intelligence, because there are many people that are using different type of terminologies like geoinformatics, geoscience, GIS, geospatial information systems, and so on. So in that context, I'll give a little bit of overview about the geospatial intelligence, and I'll be giving some applications as well. So my talk outline would be, I'll be giving a brief introduction about geospatial computing. I'll be using a lot of terminologies about statistical machine learning, and deep learning techniques and algorithms. Therefore, I would just like to introduce some of them. And then I would be talking about some applications from my own research, especially related to the urban features extractions, like such as the road extractions and urban footprint, building footprint applications and so on, and some applications on natural hazard assessment if time permits. Then I would conclude my talk. So let's look at actually the history of the origin of the geospatial. So if you look at actually, if you do a Google search, what you find basically the first usage of, there are two terms that you will be encountering. One is geospatial, that is one word. Another one would be geo/spatial. So the first usage of geospatial has gone back, way back in 1970s, as you can see from the graph that I have put it here. So, and with a rapid increase from here since 1992, the increased use of the geospatial terminology has gone upwards. Nevertheless, the term geospatial has actually not been used that much. I'll explain this why. So now let's talk about what is geospatial computing. So if you like to describe what is geospatial computing, this is a set of computational tasks that mainly involves geospatial data or informations. And we know what is the geospatial data or informations. The term geospatial data or geospatial information refers to the data or any sets of attributes or informations that is spatially referenced with respect to the Earth. That means all the data is having some sort of spatial reference data. And the geospatial systems have been conceptualized as having two basic kind of components. One is the structure of the spatial data structure. Another one is the interaction, how the data is being interacted among themselves. That means the relationship between the data. And if you want to categorize these geospatial systems, so basically you have three types of systems, geospatial systems. One is the human subsystems, physical subsystems, and activity subsystem. I'm not going into detail about this, but it's important actually to know that what is geospatial computing is all about. So now when we talk about the geospatial information, so in this context, in the context of the conference that we are talking about unmanned aerial systems, so we are having data, geospatial data coming from different sources, such as here on the left-hand side on my screen, what you could see is the UAV photo, and with varying resolutions can go about centimeter resolution. And also there are LiDAR data, laser scanning data, let it be mobile laser scanning data, airborne laser scanning data, and terrestrial laser scanning data. And those data also can have very fantastic, very high resolution images as well. Then we have other sorts of geospatial data that is coming from multi-sensor satellite images, such as synthetic aperture radar data or multispectral satellite optical images, and so on. So considering the geospatial information data or geodata, so to speak, there are so much today that is available for us to use in varieties of applications. So now let's look at actually what are the tools and algorithms that is being available today to play around with this data, because in GIS does allow actually to manipulate this data so that we can extract the information as per as our need. So the most familiar algorithm that has been used historically has been the statistical learning. And what is statistical learning? It is the ability for humans and other animals to extract the statistical regularities that we see from the world around us and to learn about actually the environment. That means we look at actually the environment, we look at the data that is available, we see the pattern of the data, we analyze them, and from there we infer some kind of information, and from there we try to understand much more about the environment. So based on those understanding or pattern of the data, we build a framework for understanding the data, and we use some sort of statistical information which can be classified either as supervised or unsupervised classification scheme. So when we have, let's say, a satellite image or maybe data that is or image coming from the drone, so basically when we like to classify them, so there are different types of classification algorithms that can be employed for feature extractions. Some of the examples that I have listed here, such as naive Bayes, Gaussian mixture, nearest neighbor, and Bayesian network. So these are some of the statistical learning algorithms. Now let's move into the next, that is the computational models, because today we are living in the digital world with so much of data that is around us, and we call it as the big data. And cloud computing is something also has been happening around us. So therefore, computational models and the utility of the use of the computational models have increased dramatically. So what is a computational model is all about? A computational model is basically a set of computational operations which is being performed in an order or in a sequence to generate patterns from given data. So like the previous one, the statistical learning, this is also similar kind of process, but here, this is something like, let's imagine, for example, when you buy a box of Lego, and there we have different sorts of information, different types of Lego tools, and that is available, hundreds of pieces of Legos that is available to us. But in order to build us actually a meaningful structure out of those Lego pieces, so we need to actually refer to that information that is coming up with actually the Lego box. So that is what we call the engine, or the information based on which we need to build our data structure. So similarly here, a computational model does follow actually a set of computational operations in an order so that we can understand actually the pattern from the data. So once we understand the pattern, then we build up a model, and that model can be used in the different scenarios or similar type of scenario for predicting a scenario. So now let's move into the intelligence. Today we are talking about the artificial intelligence, but before moving into the artificial intelligence, let's talk about the natural intelligence that human being is already blessed with. So intelligence has become a key in the computational models, and intelligence helps us to understand better. We can predict a phenomenon, we can predict, and we can also understand the knowledge much better. We could perceive information much better. We could do reasoning and planning and so on. And all these information can be useful for faster decision making. And with the intelligence, we can be able to define different expert-based systems which can be utilized for varieties of applications. But to a certain extent, human intelligence cannot be used 100%, especially when we are talking about living in a dynamic world. That means when it is related to the thousands of millions of data or billions of data that is available to us, it is almost impossible for us actually to understand using our own intelligence. So for that reason, we have to utilize a computer, and computer utilizes that artificial intelligence. So now, as I spoke about the intelligence, so this is a general cognitive problem solving skill, basically, like how our human mind is involved in reasoning, perceiving, understanding the relationship between different analogies, and calculating, learning, etc. So for example, like when we talk about the structure of the earth, so we try actually to understand the structure of the earth and compare with something like an egg. An egg, for example, has different layers, and that's how actually we try to compare. So it becomes much more easier for us to perceive those informations. Sometimes also we do use the common sense. So this is also type of intelligence as well. Intelligence comes with different types of reasoning, and also can be applied in different applications, as well as language detections, speech recognitions, into so many other applications as well. So now let's move into actually the topic whereby we are using how spatial computing or spatial data is being used in tandem with the artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is nothing but the intelligence of machines and the branch of computer sciences that has created actually it. And machine learning is basically part of it. It analyzes the data and derives some actionable insights, or derives some kind of pattern from the data intelligently. And we build up actually a model out of that, so that can be used for different applications. Then deep learning is basically a subset of machine learning in which it's a type of neural network. So if you look back actually 10 years ago, neural network was something actually we all have been talking about those days, but now we have been talking about deep neural network and so on. And I'm sure that in 5-6 years time, probably knowledge graph or other type of technology also would be taking a lead role in these kind of applications as well. Now let's review a little bit about the machine learning. Machine learning is the method of data analytics, as I mentioned, and basically it automates the analytical model building process. So it's a branch of AI, as I mentioned, and it has different types of algorithms that can be varieties of algorithms that can be applied, such as linear regressions, logistic regressions, ANN, fuzzy logic, or combination of fuzzy logic and neural network, what you call as ANFIS, adaptive neurophysical inference systems, support vector machines, random forest, decision tree, and so on. The list goes on and go on. So, but today, most of my applications, I'll be talking about utilizing the deep learning, because this is one of the NNN technique that has been popularly utilized in varieties of applications. And given that it produces much better prediction results, so therefore I'll be focusing on deep learning. So what is deep learning? Deep learning is basically, it is a type of machine learning that trains the computer to perform human-like tasks, such as recognizing speech, identifying images, or making any sorts of predictions. So this has been widely used in finance. It has been widely used in facial recognitions, or what you call computer vision. It has widely been used also in Uber applications, and you just name it nowadays. Even Google also has been using this kind of algorithms for different applications. So if you look at actually the overall graphical, graphics that I have presented here. So AI deep learning is a subset of machine learning, and machine learning is a subset of AI in a bigger scale. And today, not today, I mean, if you look back in the last decade, basically, GIS has been nicely, and GIS allows actually to utilize this machine learning and the deep learning techniques, and it can be embedded and it can be combined together so that we can utilize them for different applications, such as image analysis, image analytics, clustering analysis, classifications, and also using lots of GIS data for predictions, such as in natural hazard or in other type of predictions. Let me just quickly review about the type of deep learning, the popular type of deep learning models that is being available today. So to start with, it is the DNN. DNN is what you call is the deep neural networks. It is basically what it does. It finds the correct mathematical manipulation to turn the input into the output, whether it to be a linear relationship or a non-linear relationship. So basically, it utilizes a feed-forward neural networks with more than 2 hidden layers. Whereas the CNN, or the convolutional neural networks, basically, it is also a deep learning algorithm which can take into an input image, assign importance, or what we call as learnable weights and biases to various aspects, objects in the image, and be able to differentiate between one from other. So basically, if you want to summarize what CNN does, it basically utilizes a kind of neural networks with filter maps. But if you look at the recurrent neural networks, or what you call as the RNN is basically, it's also type of neural networks when the connection between nodes from a directed graphs along a temporal sequence. So which is derived also from a feed-forward neural networks. And this is popularly being utilized in when there are sequence of data that's available. For example, in the temperature data, or maybe precipitation data, or maybe when you have temporal data that is being available. So RNN basically is being used with the feedback loops. So another type of deep learning that is being used, that is called autoencoders. Autoencoder is a type of NN which is being used to learn efficient data encoding in an unsupervised manner. The aim of an autoencoder basically is to learn the representations or encoding for a set of data, typically to reduce the dimensionality of the data. So it reconstructs its input data. So another type which is being also getting very popular is what you call the GAN, or it's called generative adversarial networks. This is nothing but it's an approach to generate modeling using the deep learning model, such as this is a type of CNN. And in this case, it can also utilize both supervised and unsupervised learning as well. So these are actually the 5 types of most popular types of deep learning models that is being currently utilized today, obviously. And this is a field that has been rapidly growing. And I wouldn't be surprised that, in very soon that we'll be having more functions coming in and playing a big role in different applications. Now the question comes that why deep learning actually model has become so popular these days. The reason being, I have actually categorized into because of 3 main reasons. First reason would be the easy access to massive sets of labeled data, because nowadays we have so much of data that is available in the internet for free. And this has been developed by thousands of millions of researchers around the world, and they have been testing and building the different type of data sets. So when you have actually labeled data, so labeled data is the key. So when you have labeled data, that can be easily applied actually also in different applications. For example, in facial face recognitions, or it can be also in remote sensing and in medical imaging as well. And also today, the computing power has improved a lot. The GPUs and the power of the computers has increased, and the processing units are also getting much more cheaper. So that allows us also to process huge amount of data actually to process and using actually the deep learning model. So if you look back maybe 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible. And also the pre-trained models are being built by experts around the world, and they are being actually online available for the different researchers, so that the researchers can use them, can learn from them, and also could contribute towards this model by fine tuning or fine tweaking the models and perform different applications by using the transfer learning techniques as well. So moving on now, going back actually the title of my topic, geospatial computing. So as I mentioned that the geospatial computing basically depends on three main pillars of the terminology that I always explain. One is the GNSS, GIS, and the remote sensing. As you have seen that artificial intelligence has been widely utilized using the geospatial data. Therefore, the word comes geospatial computing. But the data could be coming from all these three different sources. For example, either could be GNSS data, remote sensing data, or could be GIS data. So this is for example, this is one application of computational geometry whereby we all have been using Uber data, Uber applications, whereby the geospatial data visualizations that has been rendering thousands of data, tens of thousands of 3D models that is being concurrently used by the computer. And this is what actually I'm talking about, the artificial intelligence, that how is being it's a wonderful application of AI in Uber applications. So obviously for this kind of applications, you need, when this is a real-time applications, it does require efficient computational geometry algorithms. So this is another applications such as 3D city modeling. So this is not actually the topic of my applications that I'm going to explain, but this is what actually the many people have been using for 3D city modeling, 3D texture modeling, and so on. So this is very, very useful for city planning and for architecture development and so on. Now let me move into the second part of my talk, which is which I'll be talking about some selected case studies, some applications from my own research. And to start with, I'll be talking about the feature extractions, in which I'll be giving some examples from urban land cover mapping to grass mapping and so on. So the first application that I would like to share here is the land cover mapping. This is a method that we designed by using or combining or integrating the Fourier. Fourier is nothing but the fuzzy unordered rule induction algorithm, which we integrated into the object-based image analysis. The raw data that we have taken here is basically the UAV sets of data. These sets of data that we captured some time ago back in Malaysia, and then obviously all the pre-processing steps need to be followed, and then you process them and then mosaic the images, and then on the right hand side, basically what I'm showing is basically the classified image using this integrating Fourier and the object-based image analysis. So here what we did was basically, so after capturing the data, UV data, then we did the pre-processing whereby the image orientation of the rectifications and so on. And then we did the image segmentation. So in the image segmentations, what we did the multi-resolution segmentation algorithm, whereby we optimize the scale parameters by integrating both FSO, feature space organization, and also POF approach. And then in the next step, we developed the rules. And the rule sets was developed based on the Fourier that what I spoke about. And we optimize actually the subsets of the data by using the random forest here. So this is why actually we combine both these algorithms to improve actually the classification. And then obviously we compared our proposed technique with the supervised SVM, which is one of the traditional method, or what you call is a very popular method, and also the decision tree, to see that how is our proposed method has been working. So this is the result. What you can see on the left hand side, this is the proposed Fourier, and this is the B shows the DT, the result from the decision tree, and C shows the result employed by SPM, supercomputer machine. So as you can see on the right-hand side on the matrix here, the accuracy assessment matrix here. So what you can see, the overall accuracy kappa index shows that. So obviously we achieved around almost 88%. Our algorithm produce about 88%, and whereas the DT and SPM produces about 72%. So what I mean to say here that is that if we can combine different sets of algorithms, we can ensemble both at the data level and also the model level and also at the segmentation level, it is possible actually to improve the classification accuracy. So now let me move into the next application, which is the building footprint extraction using SegNet. As I mentioned to you, the SegNet is another type of CNN model that has been used. So what we did here, the input image that we took about 0.5 meter aerial images, and we assembled the architecture of deconvolution segment network, and also we brought in the UNet network. So we combined them and we developed actually the architect to produce, we employed that architect to produce the classification here. So the target here basically is just the building map, and it can be sometimes very daunting because when you are looking at actually dense urban area, so to detect actually the building footprints could be a big challenge because of the so much of noise that is coming in the image. For example, you have the big trees and also the shadows effects and so on. So in this case, the proposed method was, it was been able to produce actually about 91% accuracy. This is another application whereby we did the road segmentations using the VNet. This is another type of CNN method. Again, in this case, we use the two types of data set that we use here. One is the Massachusetts data set. This data actually are available in the internet. And also those data are already labeled. So this is what I meant actually, the labeling data is very, very useful. And another data set also used the Ottawa data set. So then we designed this VNet model and we applied here just to identify actually the road networks here. So in this case, we've been able to achieve about 90% accuracy for the Massachusetts data set and 92% accuracy for the Ottawa data set. So once we are happy with the network that we have or the architecture that we have developed, that it can be replicated actually in other type of application as well. So this is another application is on the road segmentation again, but here in this case using the VNet. Here in this case we use the GAN method for segmentations. In this case we use the aerial images as the input images, and the GAN method produces about 92% accuracy, or more or less actually all the CNN with the segmentation techniques produces almost a similar type of accuracy. But obviously if we could improve it into 95, 96%, that would be good. But then obviously we need to work more on optimizing actually the features and then getting the best architect to achieve that. Then this is another application that I would like to share here. This is the application for the urban and peri-urban grass mapping. That means the target feature here is the grass. And I'm not talking about the trees, I'm just talking about the grass. And it is not that easy because considering given that actually the height of the grass varies in a peri and semi-urban environment area. So in this case, the input image was not actually the drone-based data, but this is basically the Sentinel-2 images because we wanted to we wanted to produce a grass map actually at a wider scale. So in this case, we applied actually LANet method, or we designed actually this method, and then the accuracy that we achieved is about close to 93% accuracy. I'm not going through detail about the architect because that would be that would be a separate lecture by itself. So some other applications that I'd like to share with you all. For example, this is a wonderful application that we have developed some time ago that is for the traffic emission modeling in GIS using the machine learning. So for example, using a very limited amount of traffic emission data, that means the emission that is coming from the traffic, the gas emission that is coming from the traffic, and in association with other geospatial data such as very high resolution orthophotos, and plus the digital elevation model and the height information and so on, we developed actually a both 2D and 3D model for how the traffic emission has been propagating in a real time. So, and this is some of the results that, during the morning, afternoon, and during the peak hours of the traffic, that how actually the traffic emission level has been varying. This is another applications. This is traffic noise modeling, and in this case, we use the neural network model. Again, what you can see here on the right-hand side, we would like to map, at a different scale, just to see that how the traffic noise that is coming from the highway has been affecting actually the local areas or the population that has been living around the highways. So in this case, again, the input images were given as the drone-based images, and plus a very high quality digital illusion model, land cover, and so on. And also we collected the data, the traffic noise data, very limited amount of traffic noise data, and then we established actually a model using the neural network model so that it can be predicted at different locations as well, at different time of the day. Now, let me move into some of the applications from the natural hazard studies. Obviously, we have been working on so many types of different types of natural hazards, but for today's presentation, I have just picked up a few. And the first to talk about was the landslide applications. In any hazard applications or hazard or risk assessment, the most important data that we use is basically the inventory data. So if you do not have a good quality inventory, accurate inventory data, then basically the prediction might go wrong. So there will be a lot of uncertainty in your prediction. So therefore, especially in an area where we do not have actually a proper landslide inventory map. So what we wanted to see that if it is possible by using the LiDAR data without having any landslide information or in situ data, if it is possible actually to classify and develop actually a classification scheme so that we can detect the landslide. So this was the motivation of this paper. So what we did was, there are two study areas that we selected in a tropical forest area, and because we use actually the LiDAR, very high resolution airborne laser scanning data, so in 0.5 meter resolution scale. So obviously we could be able to throw out actually the vegetation, and we just could be able to look at the bare earth. So the input data that we used was LiDAR imagery and the LiDAR point clouds. Then we did the essential pre-processing steps such as geometric corrections, filtering, and so on. So, but the two important parameters that we use here is the digital elevation model and the slope. So the idea was, can you just use the height information and the slope information to be able to produce actually a good quality landslide inventory? So in this case, we applied what we called as the saliency feature enhancement technique. This has been very popular actually in other domain, but was not being particularly exploited, especially in this domain. So therefore, we wanted to try if really we could employ this actually to produce a good quality inventory map. So, and then what we did was the various steps that we removed the background noise, and then the later part we applied the morphological analysis, and then applied the mean shift segmentation technique, and later on we applied FuzzyC means clustering actually to come up with the images that can be able to separate between a potential landslide and non-landslide areas. So these are some of the snapshot of the images and some of the results. For example, on the left-hand side, it shows that the enhanced image for landslide regions with saliency enhancement process. The next one is the classifying image with a selected threshold. And then after that, we reclassified the slope map. And later on, we detected the initial susceptible landslide regions after slope-based enhancement. So here, what you can see on the left-hand side is the detected landslide regions after dilate operations. And then after that, we enhance by detecting, after applying the mean shift segmentation, you could see that there are a lot of background noise that we could be able to filter out, could be able to throw out. And then finally, we produce the landslide detection map. So in this case, although we did not achieve actually 80% or 90% accuracy, but it was a very novel approach. And in this case, what we achieved in the training data set is about 84% accuracy. But when we transfer the algorithm to another study area, then we achieved around 58% accuracy. Although it is not excellent, but still it is one of the reference point that can be quickly applied actually to detect the landslide area. Then obviously one could always go to the field and collect the data and to enhance actually the landslide inventory map. So now the second application in landslides that I would be talking about is the landslide susceptibility mapping. There are thousands of papers that has been published in this topic, so I'm not going to talk more on this. But in this case, what we did was we used the CNN, convolutional neural networks. So as you know that in any kind of hazard mapping or susceptibility mapping, so you have X number of variables. Basically, then you have the inventory map, which is the dependent parameters, and then you have various independent parameters. So in this case, with the different data that we use was the aerial photographs and the topographic map, and the topographic map can be replaced with the LiDAR data or any kind of digital elevation model. And then you can be able to derive, one could be able to derive actually different types of geomorphological variables or parameters, such as the slope gradient, slope aspect, curvature, plan curvature, and so on. And then other variables such as the vegetation map and other landslide conditioning factors such as geology, soil, and land use, and all those parameters can be used, can be modeled to see the relationship between the landslide inventory and all these parameters that I spoke about. So in this case, the model that we used was CNN. And on the right-hand side, what you could see is the application of ANN, and this produces actually landslide susceptibility map. And finally, the map was classified into 5 classes using the equal quantile classification approach. And also it was being compared with other type of method that has been applied in the literature, such as the support vector machine and also the CNN, as you can see, ANN, SPM, and CNN. So what we saw is that the CNN did produce basically or improve the classification accuracy or the prediction accuracy of the landslide susceptibility map. Then let me just quickly move into another application is the debris flow studies. So here, basically, again, the first application I would like to share with you is debris flow source identifications. In this case, we use the high resolution airborne laser scanning data. So as you can see, this is the bare earth or DTM. And on the polygons, the dotted polygons are, so basically we developed actually a scheme, automated scheme whereby we can be able to detect the debris flow, potential debris flow areas. And then after detecting that, so what we did was we did actually a detailed analysis of the runout distance modeling. So in order to do that, what we did was we calculated various functions such as maximum flow height, maximum velocity. That means what would be the velocity of the debris material that could pick up, then the maximum pressure, and also the maximum momentum. So considering all these variables, then we did actually the numerical modeling, and finally you produce actually the numerical modeling of the debris flow with very high resolution laser scanning data. So what you could see here, let me, if I could again run this. So what you could see that, so basically if this is the source areas, then it does tell you that how long does it take actually to, and how much material it is going to be detached from the source area, and how long is it going to take actually to reach, for example, the highway in this example, I mean, in this case. So, and this kind of numerical modeling is very, very useful, especially using the geospatial data, high quality geospatial data, so that the mitigation measures can be taken, and the necessary, for example, geotechnical measures can be also implemented as well. Let me quickly move into the next applications, the rockfall studies, some couple of applications from rockfall studies. The first one I would like to share is the rockfall source identification. Again, the source input data was used was the laser scanning data. And then from there, actually, we use the digital elevation model, and then we derive the slope informations, and then the orthophotos. In this case, the orthophotos are also very useful in order to detect actually the rockfall source areas. So the various geomorphological variables that we used was slope and curvature, and the topographic contrast that is coming actually from the LiDAR data. And also we use the land use land cover map that we extracted using the aerial photo. So basically it is a very high quality land use land cover map using the aerial photo. Then we calculated or we established the raster threshold. So if other type of variables that we use also was also the curvature and the different type of terrain. And then we could be able to detect the potential rockfall source areas. So once the potential rockfall source areas has been identified, then we took this information to the next step. So what we did was we calculate the rockfall frequency, rockfall energy, and then we produce actually the rockfall hazard map. So what you see here basically is that if this is the rockfall source areas, then if this is the highway going on here, so basically how much of rockfall and how far they could actually bounce and travel, and so that the necessary mitigation measures could be taken. Now moving on quickly, I think I'm running short of time, so let me just quickly show you some case studies from floods. So this is another example whereby we use the multi-temporal radar sat images, but again, this is a radar image, not actually optical images. So this is a contribution towards using text-based image analysis, basically to automatically detect the flooded areas in a tropical setup. Because in tropical areas, basically most of the time, especially in the monsoon time, the optical images are more or less useless because of the cloud coverage. So in this case, we use the radar set, multi-temporal radar set images to automatically detect actually the floods and so that we can be able to detect actually good quality flood inventory map. So similarly, like how I explained for the landslide hazard analysis, this also can be similarly flood hazard assessment also could be done. Again, using the flood inventory map and also the different types of flood conditioning parameters and also various geomorphologic, hydrologic parameters, variables as well. And then in this case, the case study was SARI, but we had done actually the flood hazard mapping in different areas in Asia. And the first map here, it shows that actually the hazard probability, and then we did the detailed vulnerability and finally the classified risk map. So this kind of information would be very, very useful, especially for us actually, what you call as a reference point for, before going into developing an area. The last part would be, last part of my talk would be some couple of applications from the earthquakes and coastal disasters, because I think given that India and especially the South Asia and Southeast Asian countries are getting affected regularly due to earthquakes and coastal disasters. So this is an application that we developed actually for earthquake risk assessment for Aceh, Indonesia. That and Aceh is, as you know, that Indonesia is sitting in the in the Pacific Ring of Fire and very, very vulnerable to the earthquakes. So in this case, again, we use many types of variables, such as the seismic variables and geophysical variables and so on. And we use here ANN, artificial neural networks, actually to produce the earthquake probability map. So, and then from the earthquake probability map, then we build up actually the earthquake vulnerability. Here, what you see that, and in the vulnerability, basically we use both physical vulnerability and also the social vulnerability. And finally, we also produce the earthquake risk map. So this can be done basically at a building level. That means considering the type of material that is being utilized for a building. So if those information and the building code can be utilized, so geospatially, we can be able to produce a very good quality earthquake risk map, depending on the quality of the input data. So this is another example of the tropical cyclone risk assessment. This is what we did actually for the entire coast of Bangladesh, eastern central coastal region of the Bangladesh. So the various parameters that we use here was elevation, then the slope informations, then the proximity to coastline. That means, the settlement proximity to the coastline. Then we have the cyclone track, and those information can be easily found out actually, and then easily available. And then also the different types of land use, land cover that is available in the study area, and the population density. So considering all those variables, then we produce the vulnerability and the exposure map of the what you call the eastern coastal region of the Bangladesh, and then we produce the hazard and the risk map. So all those information that what I'm sharing here has been published, and if you are interested, actually you can always drop me an email, or you can be able to download those papers from my ResearchGate or from the journal website. And this is another applications. This is on the coastal vulnerability assessment. So similarly, and I have seen that a lot of papers also being published from the southern part of actually Indian subcontinent as well, coastal, especially the coastal areas. So in this case, what we did was we tried to establish actually the coastal vulnerability map for the eastern coast of Bangladesh. So in this case, we try to estimate actually the shoreline changes that has been happening in the last 20 to 30 years. And we calculated that, and finally we produced the vulnerability of those coastal areas by doing the exposure-based analysis. So very quickly, actually, I have shared with you a lot of applications. Obviously, the time was short, but as we have seen that the geospatial computing, and that means the combination of the very high quality geospatial data, the data that is coming from these days, the unmanned aerial vehicles, and also LiDAR data, together with the computing tools that is available to us, that allows us actually to produce and to derive features with very high precision and accuracy. And also with those information, it is possible actually to predict scenarios and to predict, for example, to produce different types of hazard, risk, and vulnerability maps. However, there is still a lot of challenges that is still the scientific community is still facing. Obviously, the question is the cost. The cost of the LiDAR system sometimes can run into multi-million-dollar projects. So therefore, obviously, with the advancement of this, the cheaper LiDAR systems that actually provides us avenues to collect data at ease and at a very cheaper cost. And the resolution of the data is also especially the temporal resolution of the data is also concerned, because especially when you are dealing with the satellite-based informations. But obviously these days we have more or less real-time data, such as the meteorological data, the Japanese satellite, Himawari, and those sort of information can be utilized. But again, there has to be some sort of compromise need to be done between the spatial resolution and the temporal resolutions. Then the data fusion technique also has not really gone into that level whereby you could be able to, fuse different sets, such for example, radar information and also optical information, and can be combined for different purpose. So that also, I think, a research area that can be, something that can be looked into. And the explainability of the model, for example, all the artificial intelligence models that I spoke about, there are certain degree of uncertainty, especially how the model takes the decision, and therefore XAI, or the explanatory artificial intelligence, is something that is also taking a new dimension these days. I'm sure that more and more research would be done in this area, so that we would be able to have a very trustworthy, reliable information, and we can be able to explain why a model actually coming to a particular type of conclusion. Another thing is also the real-time based modeling is also not available. That means if you are, let's say, capturing the data using the UAS system, so the onboard capacity of processing the data in real time and delivering the data in real time is also, we have not reached to that stage whereby those information can be utilized for emergency planning. So basically, there are a lot of things can be done, and there are a lot of ways that this research could move forward. And with that, actually, I would like to conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your plethora of knowledge. Now we'll quickly take some questions which are waiting to be answered. The first question comes: how accuracy calculations can be made for the Furia output. Will the output be compared to ground truth data or something else?
Thank you for your questions. Yeah, I mean, look, the Fourier application that what I explained basically is for a land use land cover classification. So this is a very standard process of doing the accuracy assessment. That means you obviously you need actually the ground truth or in situ data. For example, let's say if you are classifying a particular feature as whether it's a grass or urban tree, or maybe it's a building footprint, or maybe a car space and so on. So those real in situ data has to be utilized actually in your accuracy metrics. For example, kappa coefficients and other type of accuracy assessment metrics could be utilized, and that's how actually you measure the accuracy.
Okay, thank you, sir. The second question is asked by Mr. Ravi Shrestha. He's asking, can raster images be converted into vector like mapping? Can raster images be converted into vector like mapping building footprints, mapping roads, segments using AI? If yes, can you suggest how?
Thank you very much. This is a very good research question indeed. One of my PhD student is working on this topic. Basically, especially let's say if you want to update the vector maps. For example, let's say if you want to update the road networks or maybe the building footprints on a regular basis in an urban area or dense urban area. So obviously gone are the days when you go to the field and collect the data and you try actually to update those maps. So what do? We try to utilize the airborne images. So, if you ask me what is the accuracy that we could achieve, but obviously we are not there yet. We could, take the image and directly automatize the process so that from a raster image you can get actually very high accurate vector data. There are some challenges, especially when you do the segmentations and so on. But yes, what we have achieved is about 90% accuracy so far.
Okay, another question, sir. During calculation of segmentation accuracies, such as roads or buildings, do we need to take images and labels that are not exposed to the model earlier?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. When we build up actually the model, especially when you are training the model, so you need to have the level data, because this is what actually the deep learning needs basically. So once you have the level data, but again, we could actually develop a different type of framework whereby for a similar sets of, for example, sensor, it can be transferable to another area. So, but yes, level data is needed.
If we have 20 years of time series data for anything, can we use the LSTM to forecast future 10 or 20 years of information from it?
Yes, 100%, because LSTM basically is very good for time series data, and that has been utilized. Like for example, my research, we have been utilizing it for drought forecasting, flash drought detection, and also forecasting. And that is a wonderful actually algorithm which can utilize basically the temporal data. When you have 30, 40, 100 years of data, that is basically is a fantastic algorithm to utilize.
Okay. The last question, sir. It is asked by Dr. Saurabh Vijay from IIT Roorkee. Machine learning based algorithms can handle big data and squeeze important information from it, but they are still considered as a black box, which means less user control on the intermediate parameters. What needs to be done to increase our confidence in using machine learning algorithms based outputs?
Thank you. So this is what actually I have concluded in my last slide, right? So the XAI, that means the explainability AI is something that actually we are talking about today, simply because the current deep learning methods or artificial intelligence techniques to a certain extent is unable to explain that why certain variables are being utilized and how actually the model has come to a conclusion. So because of the lack of explainability of these models, so these days we are trying to use different types of tools such as Sapli, and also there is another tool, XAI tool, and I'm forgetting that name, Lime, such as Lime and Sapli. So those informations are getting very popular these days basically, and that have been tested in finance domain. And this is a research area I would like actually to urge the young researchers to take it on and then try to explore on the application of XAI in different domains, such as let it be in disaster forecasting or hazard or risk modeling and so on. So XAI, my answer would be XAI would be able to give you that trust, give you that confidence level actually when you are using in the big data.
Okay, so another question has come our way. This is the last. How do we know that the accuracy is enough for the classification using machine learning techniques?
Very, very interesting questions. Look, this is again 10 years ago. If you look back 10, 15 years ago when support vector machine became very popular, that time everybody was talking about the support vector machine. And that was the state of the art technology at that time, right? But then very soon, it was not to say replaced, but somehow the deep learning came, and with the CNN and RNN and so all these algorithms with the ability of producing very high classified map. So therefore, more or less actually we try to replace the support vector machine with the deep learning. So coming back to the number, what is the good number? But I would say anything beyond 85%, considering the type of applications. But if you are talking about, let's say, disaster. So in a disaster forecasting, so 85% is still, if it is providing actually false alarm, so obviously that is not a good thing. So therefore, it all depends on the type of application that we are talking about. But in road network extraction, building footprint extraction, and so on, I would expect at least a minimum benchmark of 90% accuracy.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for answering the questions. And we are indeed grateful to you for expanding our outlook on the subject and assure you that the knowledge shared by you will be synthesized and integrated in full potential. Thank you to all the online viewers and participants as well. We close the session now and look forward to join you in the other sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.